I am so thrilled to be sharing this episode with you tonight, something I've not seen done across Canada. Tonight, I'm joined with someone I met upon my travels to the West Bank in Bethlehem. Joyce currently lives and goes to school inside of Bethlehem. Joyce, I'm actually just so thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for joining. And I know it's really late, like midnight right now. Are you getting really
Yeah,
tired? If I can keep you up for a couple more minutes?
don't worry about it, but thank you so much for having me.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I
Yeah.
want to start off by this. Okay. So, Joyce, I woke up this morning, I took a shower, had breakfast, went to the gym, and then I just drove myself to the office. Now, that's sort of like an ordinary morning, maybe not the gym all the time. So I'm not going to pretend like I go every morning. But I
Yeah.
actually want to know, like, what does your morning look like? You wake up. What does that look like? What's your routine? Walk me through that.
Well, of course, I'm not gonna tell you the basics of my routine, Here, life is, of course, very different than it is for you guys. Freedom-wise, we do have gyms, we do have bars, we do have restaurants, we have schools, we have universities. It's a pretty good community here, but we do not have freedom whatsoever. We live within walls. We're surrounded by walls everywhere. The apartheid wall that Israel has established. So, you know, we can get by our daily lives, and that's what we have to do. So we're just used to the life here. We don't think it's weird or anything because for me personally, I was born after the establishment of the apartheid wall. So to me, I don't know life before it.
Yeah.
But again, my routine can sound very similar to yours, but way restricted, way harder. You're talking about traffic, you're talking about checkpoints within my city. So, for example, for me to go to school, checkpoint. For me to go to my friend who lives 30 minutes away, another checkpoint. So that's how life is within Bethlehem itself.
I remember
But
when we had met you and we had met some of your family in Bethlehem, which, by the way, your father is one of the best woodworkers. I still have his stuff for Christmas, just so you're aware.
that's good.
But I remember, we had visited, we were chatting, and then we went up to the city of or the town of Taiba, and we had to go through a
Hmm.
checkpoint as well. I want to
Hmm.
ask you a question that seems, but there's a huge debate on this in the West. What in your head is freedom? What's the definition of freedom to you? What does that look like to you?
Well, basic freedom is just being able to be what you are, like just to be your nationality, be Palestinian, uh, and having these restrictions around us, they limit us from being able to express ourselves, whether it's being able to express yourself like getting by your day, like in your normal life, whether it's school or anything, or expressing yourself on a different level. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's valid. No, and it's a tough question to explicitly answer. Tell me about some of the stories that we have about a minute and a half here. Tell me about some of the stories that you grew up to with your father and just your parents. You know, they're telling you stories because obviously they're much older than you are. What was their life then, and how does it sort of differ today?
Well, it differs with mainly the apartheid wall in the West Bank because before my father, we had a shop in Jerusalem near the church. So my dad would just go give his father lunch, and it would be 15 minutes away on his bike, on a bus, on anything without being checked. Now, for me, I grew up where I have to go through a checkpoint and I need a permit to enter a place that's 15 minutes away. So it takes me an hour, 2 hours to enter a place that is literally 15 minutes away.
Yeah,
So I think that's the main highlight.
I remember going from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and we had to go through a checkpoint. I remember sort of going along the wall, as I understand it. We'll get into this in the next segment. We only have about 20 seconds here, but the tourism economy since 2023, October 7th, has sort of just like completely fallen off a cliff. And I know for not to get too personal, but for businesses like your father's, that's very difficult because
Mm.
Christmas was such a busy time. You got about 10 seconds here. Just what's your sort of consensus on that?
Well, now there's no tourism at all. I think, Sam, you've seen that when you came here. There were no tourists except for you and your group of journalists. There was no one else. And it's been like that since October 7th and since COVID, actually.
Rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah.
Continuing our exclusive conversation with Joyce. Joyce, I know you're coming at us right now in Bethlehem, and it's midnight, so I'm going to try and keep you awake for another 5 minutes. We'll do that two more times after this. But I want to sort of talk about you. We have two pegs of conversation here: the checkpoints as well as the tourism economy. I know COVID was a big impact on that. I know there were major restrictions
Mhm.
replaced after October 7th, 2023, as well, with just entering into Bethlehem. I even felt some of those even when we had come in December of last year, so about 7 months ago. Let's start with the checkpoints. What do those look like for you? So you take those, it almost seems every day. What questions do you get
Mhm.
asked? What do they like to know? How long do they take? Just give me some insight into that.
Well, you barely saw anything because you're Canadian, so you just would pass by without properly getting checked. But for us, if they stop you, so they don't always stop you, but sometimes they just close the checkpoint and hold traffic for a couple of hours, which would make everyone late for their duties. The questions they'd ask, where are you going? Why are you going there? And they just ask questions to make you mad because they're useless questions and they already know the answer to them. They do not need to be asked. And mainly they stop people if it looks like an employee going just to make life harder for them. That's the whole purpose. And if it's a car of teenagers, a car of filled with boys, that's they usually target. They mainly target the youth. They stop them. They try to make trouble with them, so they'd get a reaction out of us. But a lot of people try to zip it and just wait patiently and answer the questions appropriately.
Yeah, yeah. Let me sort of ask you just about the tourism economy as well, because the checkpoints have one part to play. I mean, the tourism economy is a plethora of like multiple different issues. COVID's one of them. 2023 is one of them. Checkpoints one of them. What does the tourism economy? What did it look like? What does it look like today? I would just love to get an idea of like how drastic this is.
So I would say pre-war mostly, because during COVID we'd still have shipping for outside, so people would be able to ship their products to outside of the Palestine. But after the war, it's been completely dead shipping wise and actual physical tourists. So before it, Christmas season especially, and Easter, because people would come from Jerusalem to Bethlehem because they're already here, it would be so busy you could not step foot into the nativity church or in the square, or in the whole city, because it's filled with tourists everywhere you go, and the whole city depends on it. Every family here works in tourism, whether they own a hotel, they own a souvenir shop, they own anything that tourists use. So everyone here depends on it. It's their livelihood, and now it's completely dead. So people cannot get by and cannot afford basic needs.
So, what have you seen with the economy? I know you did this for your research report, the
Yeah.
tourism economy for one of your midterms, but what do you see? Are you seeing like massive deflation with the dollar? Like, what was so? Just a really quick story. We had also one of our tour guides when we were in the West Bank had told us that he used to do tours before October 7th, 2023. He used to do tours and he was making like 800 shekels a day, and now he's lucky if he
Mhm.
makes like 80, right? So just
Yes.
it's like literally a 10 times decrease in how much he made. And he was because he used to do the tours in Israel and he was making a ton of money, and then he would come back and he'd live like he's rich. That's totally changed. Are you seeing something similar? Are costs like totally deflated?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
I'm not gonna give you like straight up statistics because that's always changeable
For
from
sure.
month to month and from week to week. But for example, you spoke to my dad during Christmas, let's say in 2019, he'd make crazy amount of money, and now he barely made, let's say, around $1,000,
Wow.
and that for a whole year, that's absolutely nothing. It cannot even he cannot even afford to pay for university or for just to put food on the table, and that's the case of many families, but it just keeps getting worse
Yeah, yeah.
year after
Is there
year.
is there any so there's no upside. I know we're just about to jump to the next segment, but I mean, there's nothing. It's not getting better at all, is it?
No.
Yeah.
No, but of course, people will still have hope for a better future. But with the war, it stops for a month and then it's back for 2 months and then stops again. So it's just a
It makes
cycle
it
now. And
impossible.
I'ma rule the world, yeah.
Joining me from a 9 or 10-hour flight away is Joyce, coming from Bethlehem inside the West Bank. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to speak to you a little bit more in detail about the relationship between Palestinians in Bethlehem, maybe your school, your generation, and the relationship that they have with Israelis. One, what did that look like before October 7th, 2023? And what does it look like today?
mhm. uh, so one thing we have to start with is we always have to separate the people from their government on both ends, Palestinian and Israelis. Um, well, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, fair. So I want to know sort of what is the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians, like let's say
Mhm.
your generation.
Before and after.
Yeah, and valid point on separating government. It's funny.
Mhm.
We were just talking about this just beforehand. In Canada, we seem to think that like Canadians here don't always agree with the government, but in any other country, in any other geopolitical issue, it seems that most Canadians just assume that their people agree with their government on both sides. It's really weird. But anyways,
Mm.
I would love your perspective on that.
So before the war, I feel like for most people, we would believe that peace between the two states was going to be achievable. But now, after the war, I feel like people have actually opened their eyes more, and you see the diversity in opinions and how there are many things that cannot be agreed on, and mixing Palestinians and Israelis together might not be possible unless one sacrifices their identity or a huge part of who they are. So one
Interesting.
person, one, yeah.
Can I ask you something? Do you have any relationships? And I'm only asking this because another individual that I was speaking to when we were in Bethlehem had relationships. In fact, some good friends who were like
Mhm.
Jewish Israelis living in, Jerusalem and all other part like Tel Aviv, this and that. I'm curious, do you have any relationships there? Any friends? Anybody that you know? Did you? Do you not now?
Me personally, no, but a lot of my friends, they went to boarding school in Tel Aviv, so they've lived with Israelis.
Wow.
And to be honest, we're the same. At the end of the days, we're all humans, we're the same. But there's a lot of different opinions and there's a lot of political views that cannot be agreed on. But at the end of the day, we can get through the differences and find middle ground. But I feel like having friendships with Israelis is pretty normal, but it's difficult to maintain it.
Yeah, well, I know that one guy that I was speaking to actually liked a girl in Israel, and
Mm,
he could no longer see her, and he thought that she was awesome. I remember hearing that story. I can't give specifics, of course, but it was just a unique story that like is so Canadian too. It's human, you know.
yeah,
Um,
there's a.
I'm curious, and I don't want to get too political, and I'm not going to ask you for your opinion. But one thing I am curious about is the general consensus, and I know that I can't ask that because at the end of the day,
Mhm.
stats change and it always changes. So much changing. But is the general disagreement Israel's um, right to the land because they believe that they have a right to that, whereas Palestinians believe they have a right to that? Is that sort of the general disagreement, or are there more nuanced things that most Canadians, most North Americans would miss?
I feel like that's more, you're talking about the governments and the main conflict itself. But if you want to keep it based on the people, for me, with my past simple interactions with Israelis, um, they're very ignorant, I would say, about the West Bank and about Palestinians, and they don't really look into the conflict. They just look from their side and they just care about their safety. They just care about their own side. They don't care to know both sides, unlike most Palestinians I know, where they have different opinions. A lot of people think that peace is achievable. A lot of people are completely radical. You have many different opinions, and I cannot give you a general
Yeah,
consensus.
is
I
it
told
is
you
it
that in person when you came.
no, I actually really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Is it just actually that diverse of perspectives? Like you'll have, call it 10 Palestinians in like your one class, and all 10 of them will disagree on something. And then you'll have like 10 Israelis, and maybe half of them will disagree on something, and then half agree. Like, is it just that diverse? Sorry, I know you don't have much time.
I think so, yeah.
I'ma rule the world, yeah.
Closing off our discussion with Joyce, who's joining us from the West Bank in Bethlehem. Joyce, again, thank you for joining us. We only have about 4.5 minutes to close off this discussion. I wanted to talk to you about work, your dreams, your aspirations. You're currently in university, am I correct? Okay,
Yes.
and you're taking university inside of Bethlehem. What's your university called? I'm just curious.
It's Al-Quds Bard College.
Okay, and what are you studying? What does that look like? What does work look like for you right now? What does work look like after school?
Currently, I'm studying global studies and diplomacy. So, if you want to talk about opportunities in the West Bank, extremely limited, almost zero, zero opportunities for the youth. I'd say for my father's generation, the world was more open to them and they had more access to the outside. But as of today, 2026, it's very hard to get out of Palestine or be able to establish a proper, reputable life here because, if you want to talk about wages in the West Bank, they're nothing. They cannot put food on the
Yeah,
table
it
at
doesn't
all.
add up. It's almost you almost have to
Yeah.
take a family approach to just working for the family. And but I can tell, you have a certain level of diplomacy to you as well. That maybe some you're born with, some you studied. What does it look like for you? Do you plan to move? Do you have plans after? Do you hope to maybe? I know Europe is very much looked at for opportunity as well.
hmm
I don't know. Is Israel looked at for opportunity and diplomacy? Like, what do you sort of foresee?
I don't think I'd be able to work in Israel, but for example, my mother, she works in Israel. There are many people here who do work in Israel because the wages there are higher and they can afford maintaining a life in the West Bank. But for me personally, I'd hope to leave later on or continue my like further studies outside of the country because it opens a lot of doors for me, and it's unlimited. Here I just have two, three options if I do have them.
How big is
But
your
that's
class? I'm
it
curious. Like,
here.
how big is your class in university?
Well, my university has a lot of students. It's the biggest university in the West Bank, but I go to Bard College, which is a small section of my university. So my class only has 10 people in it.
Wow.
But if you want to talk about the actual university, Al Quds, it has around like 40 people per class, and there's a lot of students here.
So, just sort of as we talk a little bit about this, what have the conversations been like with you, your mother, your father? You said your mother works in Israel, so I imagine she comes home with a wage that can help support. I understand that after 2023, Israel had totally restricted work permits. I want to say that they had maybe 500,000 Palestinians working
hmm
in Israel, and then after that, as they claim for security reasons, they basically just, I don't know if they called it zero or maybe 10,000, 50,000. I don't know. What does that look like now? Have they increased it more from the West Bank?
You mean their
Like
wages
work
or employing
permits?
people from the West Bank?
Yeah.
No, there has been barely any work permits. My mom, she's a teacher, so uh, they're putting more restrictions on teachers teaching in Jerusalem because there's a lot of most of the teachers are from Bethlehem, but getting work permits is impossible right now, for sure.
So you don't even try. Okay, so let me ask you this: how hard is it for you to go and excuse my naivety, but I think most people don't know this. How hard is it for you to go and get a job in Europe? I mean, you're a smart, young, bright person who's well educated, who works hard and has ambition. Is your biggest sort of fault on that? Like, do you have to get approval from Israel to be able to leave
Mhm.
and then go and study abroad, or what does it look like?
Well, not an approval from Israel. In the West Bank, we do not have an airport and we cannot use Israel's airport. We have to cross a border to go to Jordan on foot and on like cars, which is now after the war is impossible to get an appointment to get on that border, and it's very expensive. And then you have the flight tickets, and then you have just the fact that you're a Palestinian with a Palestinian passport. You need visa, you need documents. It's very complicated and very hard, even though our diplomas, our education is all approved outside and it's all recognized, and people here are very well educated, but it's just hard to leave the country. You need a
Yeah.
lot of money for it.
Well, Joyce, I certainly hope we can do a second interview, because this is just so informative, and I could ask you a million more questions, but that is all the time that we have for today. Look, we want to hear from you, especially if you disagreed or feel we missed something important. At the end of the day, remember, do not simply accept what you are told. Challenge your thinking, engage in differences, and listen to new perspectives.
I'ma rule the world, yeah.